started the program last week, and I am very satisfied with all of the material. That is, the recordings of all of the previous study sessions and the review sessions. I didn't really even know that I was going to get that, but that I think it's going to be very helpful.
Fantastic. I'm really glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Any particular challenges you're facing right now where I could support you?
Yeah. So one area that I'm noticing over and over is that I'm missing easy questions that I should be getting right. And I'm getting a lot of the very difficult questions right. But when I go back and review, I don't normally, at the end of the test, when I have a little bit of time left, I normally tend to spend the time on, the later questions, maybe 10 to the final, however many that I flagged. And I don't normally go back to any of the first 10, but I'm noticing that in my practice test that I am missing one or two of the first 10. And I think it might be because I'm trying to get through those very quickly. And just, simple mistakes, they're really not difficult questions, I don't think. And on review, the answer is obvious, but obviously that doesn't mean much in the end.
Of course, understood. Now, it could be that you're getting them wrong because you're speeding through them too quickly. Another possibility that often happens for students is that they end up overthinking them or second guessing themselves on those questions. Is that something you think could be at play here?
Yeah, certainly. One of the tests that I took recently was the correct answer. I changed it, and I shouldn't have, but it was a main conclusion question, and I just changed it after thinking about it twice, and I had originally selected the right answer, but picked the wrong one in the end.
Yeah, it could just be a matter of second guessing yourself, and instead what you got to do is trust your gut. And so you might try, rather than slowing down on these easier ones, what if you sped up even more? What if you never second guessed yourself as an experiment? Just go through a couple of logical reasoning sections like this and see what the results are like.
Right. One thing that I've been doing that I found that I noticed that you suggested in the flaw sessions was to really go through and do the individual types of flaws, just to recognize the patterns and the way that the answer choices are worded, because of how tricky the answer choices can be worded in those flaw questions. And I was wondering because I think it's even helpful in the ones that aren't so challenging to do that, because the answer choices can still be worded in a confusing way. So for reviewing question types that I get wrong more frequently than others, do you think that it's helpful to review the most challenging or the easiest ones, or a mixture of both, or kind of the ones in the middle? And how do you determine? Do you understand? I mean, that kind of question.
I think I do. I mean, there's a number of different routes we could go here. I'll aim to paint a picture of all of them, and we could go down whatever road you'd like. So one is that in those flaw workshops, in some of those workshops, I talk about the classic logical fallacies, because you've got to be familiar with the most common flaws that tend to come up, like necessary, sufficient, confusion, correlation, causation, of course, ad hominem, and so on. There's also that not every flaw is testing the question, is testing those in particular, but you got to be familiar with those at the very least. You also have abstract language in answer choices for flaw questions, where they are referring to a fairly simple concept, but the vocabulary they're using is so difficult that can make it seem unfamiliar, or that you're not even just sure what they're talking about at all. I would always recommend doing that if you have trouble with a flaw question, so that you can at least have a picture in your head. What are they actually talking about here? You also brought up the idea of which questions should you review. And I would say everything that gives you trouble, whether it was an easy question or a hard question, if it gave you trouble, there is something you got to learn from it. Even as simple as the question number 5 you might have trouble with and get it wrong. If it was because you were second guessing yourself, the lesson learned is don't second guess yourself.
Right. Yeah, I just recently, after watching a series of the videos in the course, decided to go through and print out every question that I've ever gotten wrong the whole time that I've been studying. And of course, I've reviewed them in the past, but I decided to print out from every practice test the individual questions that I've gotten wrong. And it's a big stack, obviously, of questions. But I found that going through and really looking closely at the not only why the correct answer choice is right, but why all of the other answer choices are wrong. And one of the things that I'm hoping to get from that is a better sense of when I go back at the end of the LR section and quickly review some of the questions that I flagged, to be on the lookout for certain things that I know have tripped me up in the past. And to that end, one of the things that I struggle with is I flag a lot of questions, and I flag too many questions. So in the end, I really, maybe I'll have flagged 10, but there are 3 or 4 that are important that I go back and actually, look at more closely. And so I'm having a little bit of trouble being cognizant of the fact that in the past I flagged all these questions, and it doesn't end up really helping me so much knowing that I flagged 10. Maybe just a little bit of advice on which questions to flag, because you don't have time to go back to all 10.
Yeah, agreed. 10 is too many. Personally, I might flag 4 or 5 in a single logical reasoning section, or let's say 3 to 5. So I think you need to set up your bar a little bit higher as to what is worthwhile to flag. And I'll tell you what I tend to flag, and some of it might carry over for you as well. So tougher parallel reasoning questions. And by the way, I would flag mostly within the range of 15 and up in a section, maybe 14 and up, but the more difficult ones. So tougher parallel reasoning questions, tougher principal application questions, questions on topics that I'm not totally comfortable with. So for me, that might be science. It might be densely worded philosophy type questions, questions where you're looking at the stimulus and you can't make any headway on it, where it looks like it might as well be a foreign language, where you can't really parse out the structure because you're getting too wrapped up in the topic or too wrapped up in the language, which obviously we want to work to avoid, but LSAC is very good at what they do. So there are going to be a lot of cases where in the stress of the moment, the strict time constraint, it just might not seem workable. But upon reflection with a second look, that might be enough to help you break out of that tunnel vision. But I would keep it really to max 4 to 5 in a single section. So those are some guidelines I personally use. And that typically constrains me to 3 to 5 questions, like I said, where I'm flagging it. But it's not like it's just that anything you're not sure of, to me, that's not enough to flag it. But you could have also, I could imagine different categories where there's a question where you're not even going to attempt it in the moment because you saw if it's one of those criteria I laid out, versus a question where you were stuck and down to 2. That's a different kind of flagging where, yes, you might want to go back to it, but you might not have enough time to do both the tough ones where you weren't even going to attempt it and also the ones where you're down to 2.
Right. Yeah, I've kind of adopted the strategy of, with the parallel reasoning in particular, just coming back to those once I've completed all of the other questions, because I just know after having done the test enough times to know that I do really end up spending too much time on those questions. So in an effort to try to limit the amount of wasted time that I could be spending elsewhere, I try to come back to those questions at the end. And the principal application questions, I think it would be wise to do the same, because I think it's similar that I end up spending a lot of time on those questions, and being stuck between 2 answer choices is a different type of flag. I think that's also a good point.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, I think that the principal application and parallels, it's because it's long. That's one reason alone, is that every question's worth the same. So why spend inordinate amount of time on one question when they're all going to be worth 1 point approximately, or 1 raw score point at least? So that's my general guideline there. But yes, the ones where you're down to 2, it is a different kind of flag. As for what you do with that, maybe you budget yourself 2 of each type. So 2 that are down to 2 where you weren't even going to try it in the moment. Right. And I think for within a set of 25, if you're shooting for a top score, that's really the most you can do, I think. Because you have to,
Right.
if you're going to budget yourself an additional minute or two for each of those questions, that means you need to get to the end of the section at the 30-minute mark so that you have 5 minutes to go back and handle 4 or 5 questions, whatever it's going to be.
Right. Right. So one of the other things that I have been trying to figure out, so I'm planning to take the test in August, and I'm trying to score over 170, and my PTs are pretty consistently 169, 70, 168, 167, and I'm a little under where I need to be, but I think I've identified some of the places where I can improve considerably, just based on being more confident. Those earlier questions where I'm choosing the wrong answer choice or switching it after I've gotten it correct. So I feel confident that I can do better there. But my next concern is deciding between how much time to spend on RC versus LR. And I know that, given that there used to be 2 LR sections that were scored, that some of the attention to LR is either now, considerably more that people should be spending on LR, or if I should maybe spend more time on the reading comp section, knowing that I miss about 5 in each of those. So that's kind of I do very well on the logic games, and I do intend on continuing to do the tough ones, because I don't want to get to test day and have the logic games trip me up. But I'm not quite confident yet of the approach in terms of how much time to dedicate to reading comp as opposed to the logical reasoning.
That's a good question. So yes, in the past, because there were 2 scored LR sections, that meant that logical reasoning was relatively more important than the others. Now it's roughly a third each in terms of what constitutes your raw score. Technically speaking, reading comp is actually the greatest number of questions. Logic games is the least. But in terms of LR versus reading comp in particular, it's such a minute difference. We're talking about maybe 2 questions approximately difference. They're 25 versus 27 on average. So I would just consider, what do you actually need to work on? Like what are your weak areas? You brought up logical reasoning at the beginning of this conversation. So I would guess that maybe you want to spend more time there. There's also the fact that logical reasoning on average, students tend to find a bit easier to improve upon than reading comprehension, just because reading habits are so deeply ingrained, whereas argument analysis habits typically are not honed at all before encountering the LSAT, right? So I might devote more attention to logical reasoning for that reason alone. And you also, as a bonus, happen to have double the amount of logical reasoning practice material available as just a vestige of the old format.
Right. Right. And one of the things that I've noticed, and it's unfortunate that I missed these main conclusion questions, because I feel like it's so fundamental. But I miss some of those questions in the reading comp section, as well as in the logical reasoning section. And so I was wondering if you think it would be better to really focus on doing the logical reasoning main conclusion, really drilling those, and if you think there will be some carryover to the reading comp there, or if you think maybe there's not so much of a carryover there.
I'm glad you took it there, because I was thinking that as well. So yes, there can be some carryover in terms of the benefits you gain from analyzing arguments in LR could carry over to reading comp as well, not only in terms of conclusion, but also in terms of analyzing the structure of an argument. The role of statement, for example, role of statement comes up in both. So if you can find the conclusion in a logical reasoning stimulus, can that carry over to reading comprehension? It absolutely can. The main idea, the primary purpose in reading comp is the same as the equivalent in logical reasoning. Just in logical reasoning, it may be easier to spot because there's less text surrounding that conclusion. I would look also at role of statement as well, because role of statement is a, I think in a way, a tougher kind of question that is big in both sections. Reading comp in particular, I think it plays a major role when they're looking at what is the purpose of paragraph 2 in the argument as a whole, or what is the purpose of this particular clause in the passage as a whole. Why does the author include this? What is the purpose? What are they trying to achieve in terms of laying out the topic or laying out their argument?
Right. Yeah, and I've noticed that I do have trouble sometimes with the argument part questions in the logical reasoning section, as well as the role of the statement in the passage in the reading comp. So there's some crossover there as well.
Yeah, there's definitely work to be done in both areas, and you could even do them side by side. You could drill role of statement in logical reasoning, then do some similar questions in reading comprehension and see how does it carry over. And in your review process, what are the similarities?
Right. And I have found the resources on the workshops, the reviews, in depth on the specific LR types of questions with the previous students to be incredibly helpful. And I was very surprised to get to see those, and then also to have the study sessions on Monday through Thursday. I wasn't expecting that, and I joined actually the first day that I got enrolled in the course. I joined one of the study sessions that night, so that was a great surprise and very helpful.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear you found it useful. Yeah, the study sessions have been incredibly popular, and we just keep adding on more because students find it helpful to have that community and work through problems together. It's tough to go this alone. And the thing is that, of course, you're not alone. There's thousands of other people taking this exam, but sometimes you don't know anyone personally. And so that community can be really nice.
Right. I will say I've followed the blog since I started studying maybe over 3 years ago, and found at the time the resources very helpful, and the blog posts, fun and interactive and relatable. And when I started studying again, I wish a few months ago that I had enrolled in the course, because I think the material is, it's incredibly helpful, and there's so much of it that is equally as good and better than what's on the blog. So I appreciate it. I'm happy that I made the decision to go ahead and do it, because I think that it'll really be helpful.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. I'm glad that you're finding it helpful. I'm glad you found the blog helpful before, and I'm glad to finally have you in the course now. And I'm looking forward to meeting again and seeing your progress moving forward.
Yeah, likewise. Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anything else for today?
I think that, one thing that I would really like to make sure I have a good understanding of is in each logical reasoning question. I found there was a resource that you had for the reading comp that was just basic, it's maybe one sentence for each question type and the approach to each question type. And one thing that I'm trying to develop, and I somewhat started to do it on my own for the logical reasoning, but when I am going back to questions that gave me difficulty, I'd like to be able to look at an answer choice that I selected and say, does this answer choice do X? Just, going back, not having much time, knowing what the stimulus was. I already read it. I might reread it, and I know what the question type is. Does my answer choice do what it needs to do? And then I can move on. I'm trying to develop kind of just a quick 1-page guide that when I'm going back and have 3 or 4 or 5 minutes left at the end, that I can quickly make sure that my answer choices kind of succeed in their role, they do their job, right? And I'm finding bits and pieces of that here and there, but I was wondering, and I just want to make sure there wasn't something similar that I know that you've got for the RC, if there's something like that already exists for the LR.
Yeah, there is. I'll send you the link.
Okay, great. Yeah, because sometimes you just get caught up thinking too much, and when you could look at your answer choice and spend 20 seconds and say, I'm pretty confident that this does what it needs to do, instead you spend a minute. So
yeah, it's incredibly important to know the proper perspective from which to evaluate the answer choices. And I don't like to overly emphasize question stem types. I think they're important, but it's also important to spend time on the stimulus. But yes, it's a quick reference guide, I think, would be helpful for you. And I have that. So I'll send it to you after this call.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And it's great to meet you.
Yeah, same, Matt. Great to meet you as well. I'm glad we connected, and be in touch.
All right. Be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.